This is Gigi Sabat, and you're listening to the Walk With Me podcast. My guest today is Steve Kidd. He's a dynamic force of inspiration, a trailblazer in the world of storytelling, and he's an international best-selling author. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really cool to be here.
Such an honor to have you here today, Steve. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit more about you and where are you from, Steve?
Well, so I live in central Kansas. I live about as close to the middle of nowhere as a person could possibly get. I live in this cute little town of about 400 people, but I have an amazing internet connection here. So, everything has its trade-offs. A little bit about me. I've been selling actually since I was 5 years old, but we've been a marketing company since the mid 80s. In internet space since literally before the internet existed. And we work almost exclusively with authors these days, have for about the last 17 years now. We've helped more than 4,000 people write, publish, and most importantly, because we're a marketing company, market their books to bestseller and everything that comes beyond that.
I love it. Now, Steve, what inspired you to launch Thriving Entrepreneur?
Oh gosh. So almost 10 years ago, it'll be 10 years this December, so 9.5 right now. I had an opportunity to become the very first ever male radio host on the EWN radio network, eWomen network, if you're familiar with them. And so I launched the show there. We were on eWomen network for a year. And then I was invited to take the show actually into syndication at the end of that year. First off, we just started really interviewing all my friends and contacts and folks from my quote unquote Rolodex, if for people that know what that is.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that with us, Steve. Now, tell us a little bit more about your motto: unleash the power of storytelling, amplify your voice, and create a lasting impact.
Every one of us has a passion, but we have a purpose. There's a reason why we're here. I always like to kid, none of us were created just so that we could keep the carbon dioxide to oxygen balanced out by breathing in and breathing out. We all have more of a purpose than that. And inside of that purpose is the discovering who you are. That is your story. What are you good at? 5 years from now, the story will be different because you'll have grown and you'll know more and you'll do more. But right now, today, where you are, the things you've been through, the successes and the failures, they make up the you that is you. And there's somebody behind you. There's somebody that's going through the thing that you just came through yesterday, last week, 10 years ago, whatever. They need to know, number one, that they're not alone. And number two, they need some strategies on how to be able to get through this. It's like if you went through a swamp, or other types of really rough terrain, and you stumbled and you fell and you got all wet and all dirty and all gunky. But then after you were done, you looked back and you could see, here's the places where there were stepping stones, and here's some places that I didn't have to go through it. From our experience, we learn things. And from that, then we can help the person who's on the trail just behind us possibly navigate that a little better. And if their journey can't even be any better, although we always hope it will be, at the very least, they can do it with someone rather than being alone.
That's very true and very powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us, Steve. Now, speaking of challenges, tell us a little bit more about the challenges that you faced in your life.
Well, my father was a minister, my grandfather was a minister. So we grew up in a level of poverty that people don't usually think about. Most of us would go to church, and the thought of there's a real possibility that if I don't put money in the offering plate, there's actually a possibility that the pastor's family won't have food to eat this week. There were literally situations where I remember us having no food or enough no food that you couldn't have made a meal out of it. One time I remember it was literally a jar of pickled beets, hand canned pickled beet, home canned pickled beets. And that was all that was in the house. And God always provided. He always does. But it was a different way. And honestly, I was I was in my 40s before I even realized that that was weird or, not normal. I was actually telling the story to somebody and they said, that's not normal, right? And I was like, well, it's just the way it was, things would get bad and then God would provide for us. And, life's gone through that way. I have been through 2 marriages and 2 divorces. Both of the women left me. The first time I became a single parent of 5 kids, all by my own, and was that way for almost 5 years. And though all the children were grown by my second divorce, I then, at 53 years old, had the exciting opportunity to live by myself ever for the very first time ever in my life. I say it like it was a really great journey. It wasn't nearly as cool then as I can look back at it now. But those are just a few of the challenges throughout the course of life that I've been through.
What does it feel like on the other side of divorce?
Well, there's the early days of it, and you feel like the biggest loser in the world. You are just, how could I possibly be this unlovable, this whatever? Put all the negative things you can ever say, all of them, I think any of us that have gone through a divorce go through. But through time, if you'll spend the time, if you will work on yourself and look at it as an opportunity to grow rather than the opportunity to go hide in your bed, which often we want to do, and that's okay. But if you will really begin to look at how can I be better, it becomes a really great opportunity to really truly work on yourself, especially when you find yourself totally alone. A friend of mine early in those days, she told me that I would get to the place where I would crave being alone. And I, of course, told her she was crazy, but it really did get to that point where I loved being alone. And I had to go through the evaluation of, for my birthday, what do I want to do for my birthday? Not what do the kids need to have us do, or, what has my wife got planned, but, what do I really like doing? What are those kind of things? And it's in that knowing of yourself that a lot of cool things come out. For me, that's where, even though I've been massively creative all my life, that's where all of the books that I've written really came out to the world. I mean, there was a couple of them that were already published, but that's where I really began to develop and send them out into the world.
I love it. Now, Steve, what message do you have for an individual in a similar situation as you that has gone through divorce?
Life isn't over. You still have a whole lot of race in front of you, and there still is a purpose and a reason for you. It may not feel like it, and that's okay. And it's okay to take time and to grieve what was, but be ready and available for something amazing to happen, for something to come in a way that you would never experience or expect it to take you to a place that you've never even dreamed of being, because, prior to the divorce, it either wasn't going to be possible or, it just wasn't something that you could focus on. So take this time and really love yourself more than anything else.
I love it. Love yourself. Very powerful statement. Now, Steve, can you tell us a little bit more about your books?
Oh, so the first set of 10, it originally came out, so there's actually 11 of them. It originally came out called 10 Things That You Must Have to Succeed in Life and Business. It actually, ironically, I was writing a free giveaway, like we all have on our websites. And 110 pages later, I realized I was writing a book. My earliest mentor and good friend, Dr. Donald Joy, helped me edit it and wrote the foreword for the book. And later I discovered that there was so much more that needed to be said. And so I re-released that one book as 10 individual books in a series. And that was my first 11 books. And then I wrote a series of marketing books that, as you can imagine, they were about marketing and book writing, the ultimate marketing tool of a lifetime, where I use the concept of my little dog Mocha. She's such a sweetie, but how great dogs are at selling us on things. They sit there all cute looking at us with those eyes until, even though we told them, no, I'm not going to give you a bite, we end up doing it, don't we? And then I wrote a book about how to rate your bestseller. And then my 20th book was called Bestseller is Only the Beginning. Now, in between there was a couple of anthologies that I was in. So I wrote a chapter in the book. And I also wrote a series of romance. They're a little bit on the erotic side, if you will, not because that's necessarily important of it, but it was very real and raw. And it's really kind of cool to see how the girl that is the main character in it, how much she grows during the course of that. And that was a trilogy that I wrote. And then I was inspired to actually write a fourth book in that series that is a kind of standalone companion book to it that, is actually a minor character in that story, his outside view of that, and the love story of him meeting and falling in love too. And some of that, we talked about divorce earlier. Some of that was me rediscovering the possibility of love and vision and those kind of things. And it's under a pen name for lots of reasons, not the least of which is that I'm afraid my mom might read them and I don't want to, shock her. But, and then, let's see, I wrote a book called Playing Hit It and Quit It with Jesus. It's a men's guide to being the bride of Christ. And I really explain in a very deeply raw and real way to men in the church just what it means to be the bride of Christ and what it means for our wives, the kind of invasiveness that it is to be a wife versus a husband and how we have to be open to that. And then I wrote a fun little comic book. I actually started it during COVID. It's comic strip style, and it's called Romeo the Suicidal Parakeet. And it's just all kinds of snarky comments about things that are going on in the world. It's actually based on a true story, though. We had a bird that kept dropping himself on his head, and I couldn't figure out why the crazy bird was dropping himself on his head. And so many years later, I wrote the book to explain maybe some of the reasons why the bird would have been dropping himself on his head. I'm actually working on the sequel to that one now. Romeo's going to get a job in HR, taking the sick calls from people, and he's not having it. He's very disgusted with people's excuses for not going to work.
Thank you for sharing this with us, Steve. And where can folks find your book?
All of my books are on Amazon under the name Steve Kidd, well, except for the other ones. And you'll have to contact me directly if you want to know the other series. But yeah, they're all on Amazon under the name Steve Kidd.
Excellent. Now, Steve, what message do you have for an individual who may be working on writing their own book?
My number one message usually actually is don't. You absolutely need to have a book. Seth Godin said it so well. He said, if you want to write a book to make money, then don't. But if you want to make money, you absolutely need to have a book. And so what I teach and what I do with my clients is I actually use speaking to write. Most people need to be authors, but very few people are actually really good writers. All of us, though, can tell our own story, the things we've been through and those kind of things. And using that speaking to write, we can bring your story out, and it can be very powerful as well. It's really, really the real you.
That's very true. Steve, can you tell us a little bit more about your company?
Yeah, Thriving Bestsellers. Like you said, we've been in business under various different names over the course of my life for 37 years. But Thriving Bestsellers is a marketing company that works exclusively with authors and people on their messaging. We have a product, a program that's a done for you program, starting from, concept, or even I know I need a book, but I don't know what to do, all the way to making it a bestseller. And then our follow-up program to that is what we call our Beyond program. What are all the things you're going to now do with the book? And then we also have a done with you version of that for people who really do want to do the writing. And as well as we have a whole marketing package for folks that already have their book and it didn't reach bestseller or it needs more help. We come in and we help you with that. And with all of them, we guarantee that your book will be a bestseller. In fact, we have 100% success making people bestsellers.
Absolutely amazing. Now, Steve, do you have any last words for the audience?
More than anything, somebody is waiting on you. There are people in our life that without them, we're lost. I'll give you a perfect example. When my youngest daughter, Maya, was going through leukemia, I'll jump to the end. She's fine. She's married. She's having a great life now. But she was hit and miss there for a while. And the people who were online in the different parenting communities of kids with acute myeloid leukemia, sharing what they had been through a month or two ahead of what we were. It was breath. It was the life for us at that point because the doctors didn't have a whole lot of good to say. And so it's important to know that no matter what you're going through, no matter how awful it may feel, there's somebody that needs especially and specifically you to help them.
Thank you, Steve. And very powerful statement. Someone is waiting on you. I love it. And Steve, thank you for being a guest on the Walk With Me podcast. Where can the audience find you?
Well, of course, thrivingbestsellers.com. I think I saw that up there before. But if they want to really get a jump start into getting to know me, if you go to ongoingwealthguide.com, I got a free gift there for you. It's a little 5-step program that can help you, no matter what's going on, know how to be able to reboot and recreate the ability to have the kind of wealth that really matters. You know, the ability to pick up from whatever situation and begin to again create income. And then if you want to, you can actually even get a copy of my book, Bestsellers Only the Beginning. That's part of that offering. So just go to ongoingwealthguide.com.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure to check out Steve on all of his social media platforms and also his website. That's thrivingbestsellers.com and also ongoingwealthguide.com. And Steve, thank you again for being a guest on the Walk With Me podcast. And it was an honor to be on your show as well. God bless you, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me.